things are constantly changing. The consumer every other day has a new claim that they're excited about, whatever that is, or some new ingredient, or perceptions are shifting as we watch lifestyles change before us in media and on social media and in movies. People start wanting different things or thinking about things in a different way. If you have not talked to these consumers deeply in 2-3 years, you're likely starting down the path of losing relevance.
Thank you so much for being with us. We are so excited to dive in to all things brand strategy, which is your sweet spot. And I'm just excited to kind of package up this value and deliver it to our audience where we all live as marketers in this topic. It impacts our daily work. So first, to kick us off, in your own words, what is brand positioning and why is it important, especially through the lens of a challenger brand?
Yeah, thank you for asking me. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and talk to you. And I'm really passionate about brand positioning, which is a funny thing to say. But I think when brands are able to hit that sweet spot and really figure out what brand positioning means for them and for their business, it is such a game changer. At the end of the day, brand positioning is just about who you're talking to, what you are saying to them, and why they should care. And that is another way of saying your brand promise, what it is that you are offering them that they should keep coming back to you for every single time they engage with your brand. And most brand owners don't talk about it in that language, but we're all actually talking about brand positioning all the time. We just may not refer to it as that. There are a lot of conversation about who is my audience, who do I communicate with, how do I build products for this particular consumer. A lot of conversations around what's my point of difference, how do I know that I'm better than the competitive set, and also a lot of questions, particularly for challenger brands who need to leverage some of the other parts of brand positioning that sit sort of outside of traditional brand positioning, like purpose and brand values and brand identity. How and when am I pulling and pushing on those in order to get the behavior change that I'm looking for? So again, the brands are already talking about it. You just don't realize that you're talking about brand positioning and how important it is to be really clear about it in order for it to have its big impact on your brand.
Talk about the benefits, like why it's important. And I know, like from my side, you see things like putting leadership in lockstep and stakeholders in lockstep, right? And it informs business decisions. It gives you clarity. I think when brand positioning is done well and it's presented and it's received well, it like brings oxygen to the room, to a leadership team, and drops their shoulders, right? Talk more about like why it's important.
Yeah, to me, the brand positioning, and again, a little bit broader outside of positioning alone, the brand fundamentals are the DNA, the Bible, map, a compass to the efforts the organization is making. You are putting in sweat and tears if you own this company, or you are putting in sweat and tears for a career in this brand. And you're doing that for a hope of some impact in the world. We forget that when we have back-to-back meetings every single day and you're trying to hit a number for the quarter, as many CMOs and CEOs of challenger brands are doing. But that doesn't change the fact that underneath all of that, there is a foundation that has to guide you through the choices you are making. Because you are not a marketer, you are not a leader if you are not literally making choices every day, strategic choices every single day to move your brand forward. And if you don't have that foundation that we can all not only agree on, but align behind and push towards together, you're quickly going to start to see things fall apart in execution. And honestly, teams spend about 80% of their time, maybe more, on execution. If that 20% isn't right, the execution is just not gonna deliver. And so to your question on what are some of those signs, well, one of the best signs is a problem with share. Share is one of the easiest way to see, hey, somebody is doing a better job than I. Often we talk about that in terms of things like, maybe their price is better, they're investing more in marketing, or they've got a great social media trending video. Yes, that may be true. That is a symptom of something else that has happened, which is they have developed a strategy, they have clarified their positioning, they better understand their consumer, they're developing products that are more aligned to consumer needs. All of these things I'm describing are all still brand positioning. We may not talk about it that way, but that's actually what it is. And share is one of those things that shows up and starts screaming at you immediately. Some of the others you more easily connect to brand positioning, where people hear things like your brand relevance metrics, for example. People will easily connect that to brand positioning, but actually all of the things come back to brand positioning.
Spot on. And it's interesting to hear your perspective and just helping us organize our thoughts and defining. It's a lot of these words that, depending on which setting you're in, get thrown around. And I love this perspective that you're bringing on how to organize our own thoughts and define kind of where all of these efforts actually sit right up underneath this core concept of brand positioning. You've also said that brand positioning helps a company de-risk. So tell us what you mean by that.
At the most basic level, risk is an issue of uncertainty, of unknowing, of a lack of conviction. That is what risk is. The way to de-risk is to learn more, to know more, to be smarter about topic that is at hand. That doesn't mean it eliminates risk, but at least puts you in a less risky position than perhaps your competitors are in. And the way that brand positioning and brand fundamentals help to de-risk a business is that it forces really important strategic conversations that clarify what we are hoping to accomplish and make it a lot easier to figure out how to accomplish that. So one of the easiest things to pick on is the and also problem. The and also problem, which happens a lot with challenger brands, is that we've got a ton of stuff we want to say. This thing tastes great, and also it has low sugar, and also it's female founded, and also we source from California's special farm, and also it's a great price, and also you can find it at Whole Foods. It's just and also. There are a number of things people try to add on to their messaging. The problem with that is that the consumer can only receive so much at any given point in time. The same is true for investors or for social media or for even your team internally. We can only digest so much at any given time. And the truth is that only so many things are important at any given time. I just had this conversation with a client right before we got on here in this discussion. We were talking about the founder story and what role it plays at the point of purchase. When someone is coming in, they happen to be in a beverage category. Somebody's coming into, say, a 7-Eleven, and they are hot and they are sweaty and they just need a cold drink. They couldn't give a who founded this product. I need the thing to taste good. I need it to be refreshing. I need it to be cold, and I need it to fit the budget that I have right at this moment in time. After I've gotten through that moment and I have a chance perhaps to reflect on the package, maybe I really enjoyed the taste performance and I want to learn more about the brand, then the message of the founding story may start to seep through. And the role that it plays is to connect with me now on a more emotional level. We got the functional benefit clear. Tasted great. It was cold. It was refreshing. Right price, right place, right time. Check, it did its job. Now I can emotionally connect with the brand. And this is where that founding story really starts to make the difference in the way that you connect with that consumer. But creating a package where front of packet says, oh, look at me, I'm from this place and I did these things, that's only going to take you so far. There's a novelty in that for sure, but it's only going to take you so far. So that's a good example of where you need to just know what the right thing to say is at the right time.
Kathy, I want to double click a little bit on this, what the symptoms are that present themselves when a positioning is poor or just tired. I used to do a lot of production in Florida, and I remember always passing this one store, and it was called Not Just Futons and Bar Stools. And I was kind of like, always looked at that. I'm like, and therefore you're what? Like what? Okay. So then more recently I was in Boston. I saw this restaurant that said Thai by day, sushi by night. That just says instant stomach ache. But so like sometimes you can see it very clearly that there's a positioning challenge that needs to be worked on. But oftentimes you got a marketer that's, has some influence over the trajectory of the brand, and they're within an organization. Maybe they're leading teams, maybe they're part of a team, and they might have a positioning, but they look at it, they question it, and maybe there's some things that could be optimized or it's not good enough. So if you're in that spot, how do you know if it's poor or tired or just not good enough? I mean, what are some of the things you've seen working with these types of brands?
Right. So from the inside, what am I looking at that's making me uncomfortable? There are actually a lot of signs that say you need to pause and revisit. And I'm going to just kind of run through a few of those. It depends where in the hierarchy or the structure of the organization, how much which of these you see more or less, but they all exist and can be present regardless of the brand. One of those that I find is probably the most frustrating, I think, for all the parties involved is the relationship with an agency that's doing any kind of creative work. The problem is that if your brand positioning is not articulated clearly and strongly, your briefing is only so good.
Yeah.
An agency can only do what you give them to work with, and what happens is the agency then attempts to solve for, as great service providers as we are, we want to help you get where you're going. So we try to do some patching and figure out, like, how can I help them structure this so that I can do my best work, which is this creative, whatever, a website, a social media plan, whatever that happens to be, packaging, graphics. Inevitably, work comes back to the client and the client is unhappy. This is off the mark. This didn't get where I intended you to go. That if you are doing that multiple times, or if you find that you feel like you have a super clear vision of what you thought you wanted, but the output is just not matching that, definitely your briefing is off, and likely it starts at the brand positioning. It could also be your objectives are wrong or your channel is wrong. There are other things that could be it, but particularly if you're going round and round, and if it's happening at every point. My creative with my ad agency, my packaging graphics, I briefed R&D for a new innovation and they're giving me something that doesn't fit. All of these things where you're interacting with external teams and they're just not getting it, likely your positioning is either not strong enough or you have not communicated it effectively and clearly. Another thing that happens is very similar, but with your team. So I'm a CMO. I've got this team. We're in the middle of strategic planning. I'm giving guidance and direction, and we're just not on the same page. I have a vision for where I see the potential for this brand, but the team is not clicking. For whatever the reason, we need to go back. Let's make sure we are all on the same page about this brand positioning because we are not saying the same things. Another one is I have difficulty trying to figure out what is my real point of differentiation. This one is particularly difficult for as brands age. So if you're kind of inching out of that challenger stage or have been in challenger for a while and you're sort of more on the mature side of being a challenger, things are constantly changing. The consumer every other day has a new claim that they're excited about, whatever that is, or some new ingredient, or perceptions are shifting as we watch lifestyles change before us in media and on social media and in movies. People start wanting different things or thinking about things in a different way. If you have not talked to these consumers deeply in 2-3 years, you're likely starting down the path of losing relevance. And once you start to see that, hey, these competitors are either talking in a different way, they have ingredients that are different, maybe their packaging is different, they're priced differently, they have different innovation, I'm losing out. You likely need to go back and figure out what is different about the consumer, the marketplace, that I need to then tweak this positioning to get to the right place. And I've given a few there. I think that's enough for now, but there are a lot of things like that that point to a problem, right?
Yeah, a lot of symptoms that can bubble up.
You've said that you need to nail 5 key elements to achieve a powerful positioning statement. Can you walk us through what some of those elements are?
Yeah, absolutely. So these are 5 components of the Clarity Catalyst framework, just my proprietary framework for brand positioning. It was developed out of my experience with very young startups. I've got 20 years CPG experience. I've been doing positioning that entire time, but the majority of my work up until about 3 years ago was with established companies, large Fortune 1000 companies. And people in these companies, they know what they're doing. They're marketers. They've been classically trained. They understand positioning. They get it. I didn't have to work so hard to explain or help them pull that together because they're halfway there, more than halfway there. Starting to work with startups where the founders they used to be an accountant, or there was a teacher, or maybe a stay-at-home mom. They don't really have these principles. Were never taught to them, nor should they have been, obviously. And so in trying to translate that to them, I realized that what was needed was a sort of a simplification of what am I saying to who and when. A little bit of what we talked about in the other question there. And that's where this framework came from. It's called the Clarity Catalyst framework because it allows this jumping off point of clarity that makes everything else easier. It begins with purpose. We hear a lot about purpose-driven purpose-driven companies, and maybe we can talk more about this in a second, I believe strongly as I can, that every single company needs to have a purpose. You can have a purpose. Purpose is not synonymous with social mission. You don't have to give money back or shoes or water or any of these things to be a purpose-driven company. We can certainly talk more about that. So we start with purpose. It sets up the foundation for everything you're doing. And purpose is about the thing in the world that is motivating us to get up and do this work. The second piece then becomes mission. Mission is the what am I doing? So yes, this thing is calling me to action, but like, what am I literally going to do about it? Do I maybe create a line of products that's going to help people accomplish something? Or perhaps it's about infusing culture with a new thought and a new perspective through a product, but still could be part of your mission, right? It's literally what are you doing in order to get to this purpose? That then leads to brand positioning in the most literal of ways, brand positioning. And brand positioning is about defining the consumer, the problem they're facing, and how your solution is differentiated from what else they could find. It's in essence a summary of the brand promise at the product level. And I talk about positioning and the product as a tool that is in service of your purpose and your mission. The product is a tool that is in service of your purpose and your mission. That means that I need to do everything I can to make sure this product is going to connect with the right audience, deliver value to them so that they in turn will deliver value to me, typically in a monetary value. They are giving me money and share in exchange for the value I create for them. And then I can use that value to address the purpose and the mission. And that ultimately is how the circle of purpose and mission come back together. And that's what the product does. The last two pieces of the framework then become brand values. This is how we operate in the world. How do we behave in a way that we want to see reflected back to us in the world? This is usually where people get tripped up on pulling values into brand positioning. Sustainability being one of the biggest ones. Like, oh, well, we need to say that we're eco-friendly. Sure, the consumer cares about that somewhat. It varies greatly by category, but they're unlikely to be buying, depending on the category, but for most categories, unlikely to be buying this product because it's sustainable. What sustainability is doing is showcasing the values of the brand that make me feel good about continuing to engage with you as a brand, to becoming a lover of this brand. So while you may not put that on the front of pack, you find other ways to communicate that these are our values, this is important to us, that helps the consumer connect with you. And then the last piece then becomes identity. And identity is what everybody knows brands to be about. Often people talk about branding, they really just talking about identity, not these other pieces, but it's just a piece of it. Identity is how you show up in the world. How do you look? How do you talk in a way that's recognizable to your consumers? And there are actually a lot of pieces that often get put into positioning that belong in identity. So this sense of wanting to, there are some products, say, for example, that are representing culture. So if you have an Indian American, I know someone, her company's name is Rekha, she's a beauty company. She is literally putting ingredients sourced from her community into those products. The identity of the brand has to show that it's from India, that it has these Indian roots. And depending on your product or your brand, that may be enough just to see it in identity that you don't have to scream it. Oh, by the way, it's also from Mexico. Just show me that it's from Mexico. You may not need to tell me. Again, it depends on the product category and the brand itself, but that's where identity can help also tell part of the brand story. So these 5 pieces, purpose, mission, literal brand positioning, values, and identity, they sort of all come together to tell a more cohesive story about the brand that lets you put all of the pieces somewhere so you know you have them and then decide what to leverage depending on the time and the context that you're talking to a consumer.
The framework is great and you really simplified it. And I think if you were to see this like on a one pager with to fill in, you'd kind of go, oh, well, this all makes sense. And it does. And it's simple, but then you do a round one draft of copy to fill in all these things you're talking about. And it's kind of a mess at first because it's hard to figure out what goes where. It's a lot of prioritization of what's meaningful, but then also you tend to start filling it in and like there's a lot of redundancies. So this doesn't go here, it goes here. And then there's marketing puffery and fluff words and things you got to start to get rid of and really give it substance. So while the framework you created is really amazing and simple, that doesn't mean it's easy process. I mean, it's hard. It takes a surgeon's touch to get there. It is
really hard, actually. When I train about this, I don't normally say it when I'm doing work with clients because I take the hard out. I make it easy because I'm the one there to help translate and speed through that
Right.
process, right?
Right.
But when I'm training on it and you have to do it on your own, it is actually very difficult because a lot of what you are doing is nuance. The entire thing is nuance, right? And it feels like marketers, and it is not a lie, spend a lot of time worried about one little word. We absolutely do. And on purpose, because each word matters. One of the easiest ways to see that is talking about what is a funny brand? What is a funny brand? Is it ha ha funny, I'm cracking up, falling on the floor with tears? Or is it like, man, that was really smart funny? Or is it witty? Or is it funny like dad jokes funny? Like how many funnies are there? Same is true for all the other things. The same is true for healthy. The same is true for happy or for joy. And one of the phrases I say to my clients a lot and when I train is you've got to stay away from throwaway descriptions. Throwaway descriptions is just surface level stuff.
Yeah.
Do not come to me and say your target audience is a millennial mom. What is that? Like, who's a millennial mom?
Right.
Like, there's literally like 8 billion millennial moms. That's not enough of a descriptor. I like to use the example of a client I worked with that is in the pasta space, and their initial draft of their consumer target was a foodie who likes to cook at home. It feels like that could be getting you somewhere, but then you start asking the question, what is the foodie? What does it mean to be a foodie exactly? A foodie could be somebody who likes to, they do everything they can to travel every weekend to try new restaurants. Is that the foodie you mean? Or do you mean the foodie who is at every restaurant opening locally and then goes home and tries to recreate the recipes? Or do you mean a foodie who follows ingredients? And when you come visit them and they make you dinner, oh, I found this new blah, blah, blah oil with such and such infused. Is that the foodie? Like, what do we mean by a foodie? What do we mean by home cook? Because we're all home cooks. Everybody's got to make something. Yeah. Do you mean somebody who's like, oh, I'm so annoyed, I got to cook again, which by the way is me. I'm so over like making meals. I can't even stand it. Is that what you mean? Or do you mean somebody who's a home cook and like writes down recipes and creates a cookbook? This is what I mean about the nuance and the richness behind the words we use and why it does take time. And the way that I help my clients through that process is by being the provocateur. I like to say that I use provocation. Yeah. So you'll say something to me and I say, okay, but what does this mean? You said it this way, but how does that fit in the context of this? And have you considered it this way? And the entire process is very much like brand therapy. Clients say that it's like brand therapy. Last year, someone said that it's like I'm a brand doula, where I'm helping you sort of birth your child in a moment of pain and emotion. But that's really the work of a facilitator through a process like that. It's not my job to tell you what your brand is. It's my job to kind of pull it out of you and help you shape it into the words that make sense for what you're trying to accomplish.
Oh, yeah. No, you described it really well. There's so much crystallizing and distillation and editing and re-editing and nuance and choosing every word wisely because every word counts, right? Kathy, how do you know if you got it right?
There's only one way to know. I mean, there's only one way to know, and that is the consumer. The consumer is your answer. So what that means is there are many ways to know the consumer if you got it right or wrong. The consumer will reward you with their love in the marketplace. You certainly can test it. There's quant and qualitative testing that can tell you if that's working. And then there are all kinds of metrics that tell you whether the consumer is getting it. None of them in isolation tells you yes or no. A lot of brand positioning, like a lot of marketing, is intuition, which is why a lot of people think they can do marketing, even if they're not marketers. A lot of it is, but there's a big chunk of science behind it too. So it's not enough. But all of those metrics, it's about paying attention to what is happening in the way your consumer is engaging with your brand in all of the ways they could on social media, on point of purchase, what is happening when they're calling in and complaining. What are they complaining about? How people learn about your brand, how they try your brand, how they use the brand. Are they taking it and using it like you intended, or they're doing their own thing? All of these sort of touch points back to the consumer help you to start to understand if I got it right or not. My goal and my goal for my clients is to get to 90%. I've yet to see a brand positioning that is at 100%. And the reason why is that for as much as we try to learn about consumers, there's always a little bit we just don't know. We don't know what our competitors are doing. Yeah. There's a little bit of what's happening there. The world changes dynamically all the time. So you just need to get to a place where you feel confident enough and then watch the consumer in the marketplace to see if I nailed it or not.
So in brands you've worked with, is there an example of, you get through brand positioning, you bird it, you put it out into the world, and then you start to get feedback in a way that you go, yeah, this is working. I mean, I know this is working. I know it because what have you seen?
One of the favorite ways to get that is to get the big accolades, right? So the IRI's new product pace setters, or a retailer is awarding you a great new product, or your brand is awarded champion in the shelf set. You're going to see share numbers that would be going up, which again, a lot of these things is not just positioning, right? There's also all the execution of it, but that's what you're seeing. You're seeing a net promoter score. And if you don't know what a net promoter score is, in essence, how much a consumer is willing to speak on your brand's behalf, to be evangelical for your brand. You're seeing that number go up. And especially in brand health metrics, which, by the way, challenger brands are usually late to brand health metrics, and they should definitely get on that sooner rather than later, where you are measuring things like awareness, relevance, is the brand for me, fit to the needs that I have, those types of brand metrics. Those are very clear. Particularly a measure like relevance, which is saying this is still something that is appropriate for me in my life. If you have lost relevance, it doesn't matter how great the product is. Once that relevance is gone, there's just no role for you in my life. So those are the specific, I think, metrics that you're looking for in the world to tell you that you've done a good job.
Okay, that's super helpful. So as we kind of close here, get in the shoes of a marketer that might be looking around and going, we might be stuck, or we might be stale, or we might be off a little bit, or we're not getting the positive consumer feedback that we are hoping. What is a starting point to go down this journey? Because it seems a bit overwhelming. So how do you take that first step?
It is. I'm actually going to give you 3 things for them to go off to do. The very first thing is to solve for the overwhelm. The reason that it feels overwhelming is that it is a lot. If you start thinking about the 4 Ps and the 5 Cs, and there are more like letter acronyms and frameworks, it is a lot. Very first step is just take stock. Don't try to solve for things. Where are we today? And I would go in a really methodical approach. Let's start with what the packaging looks like. Let's talk about what the product looks like. Am I doing well? Am I not doing well? What have consumers said about our website? How's our social media doing? What really is more like a situation assessment of where the brand is today. That alone will relieve so much headache. I'm often surprised by how many brands are not doing this sort of annual assessments of the business. They often will do it at the sales level. So let's go look at, scan data and see how we're doing at retail. But that assessment needs to go much broader so that you can really understand the whole performance of the brand. Once you've been able to take that stock, which is number one step, it starts to get clear for you where you see the gaps and the outages. What is important in that second step of synthesizing the learnings to the most important actions to take is that you are continuously getting down to the why and the what. So it's not enough to say, well, we have an awareness problem. We got to get awareness. Okay, but like, what does that mean? You're going to get $15 million for a media investment? Probably not. How do we break that down? Who are you trying to get awareness with? And once they have the awareness, what do you want them to do? Because just being aware of a product is not getting you share. So what's the point of the awareness? And who are these people that you are trying to get awareness with? Is it your ideal target, or is it some growth target, right? So really starting to ask the why. Why is this important? And so what if I get it? And then the third thing becomes connecting all of the dots. The third part is usually where people begin. All right, what are we going to do? Hey, we need a new social media campaign. We probably got to refresh the graphics. That is not the place to begin. If you are there and you haven't thought about the other pieces, these tactics are not going to solve the problem. And you'll wind up spending a lot of money to get to an answer and not have it. And so pausing and saying, now let's brainstorm what we think we need to do, and then tick it back up. Let's just tick right back up to why and the what do we think we're going to get from it? And based on the situation analysis we did, do I really feel like that's going to solve that problem that we were talking about? Or am I just talking to myself? So I think those 3 pieces are a great starting point. Once you've done that, now we're in a position to start working on brand positioning if it needs to be edited. And that almost always, 99.9% of the time, starts with, let's make sure we know the consumer well, which is typically that first step. Consumer.
Yeah, in that first step I call that step the standing in front of the
Yes.
mirror naked step. It's like,
I
just like,
love
all right,
that.
what do we have here? What's our starting point? And then we can start running or doing sit-ups, whatever it looks like. But yeah, you got to evaluate, have some self-awareness, and just collect the data, assess.
Right.
It's just information. Okay, here's where we are. And then what are we going to do? How are we going to move forward? So that's really helpful. I think people often feel stuck, and it's just start somewhere, and starting with just collecting where things stand is really, really great. So Kathy, thank you.
Yes.
We really appreciate you and getting the chance to talk to you about it. You have so much passion and knowledge and just expertise in this category. So people, if they're interested in getting to know you more, they can find you on LinkedIn. Where else?
Yes,
That's probably the
absolutely.
place to go,
LinkedIn
right?
is my go-to. But you can also find me actually at www.theclaritywizard.com/podcast. I actually do have some downloads there for your audience. If they're interested in some of these templates, they can learn a little bit more about the framework and a lot of the things and the points that we were talking about now. You'll see some content there that can help add more color to that. So that's definitely a place to start, that website.
Awesome.
I'm sure it'll be in your show notes that they can access it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Such a pleasure.